"You shouldn't have done that," Tasha Williams said quietly, her voice calm but firm, as she stood at the edge of the park, eyes fixed on the approaching officers. It was just another quiet evening, or so she thought, as she jogged along the winding path with Max and Rex, her two military-trained dogs trotting behind her. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving a soft orange glow in the sky. She had earned this moment of peace after a long week of training and working with the dogs. She had earned the silence, the stillness. But now, that peace was shattered. The officers had noticed her presence in the park, and to them, she was an unknown, a threat, maybe. Or worse, just someone to be questioned. They approached her without hesitation, without any sign of warmth or understanding. It wasn't uncommon. People like her, black women, often found themselves on the receiving end of unwarranted suspicion. She had dealt with this many times before. "Ma'am, we need to ask you some questions," one of the officers called out, his hand hovering near his gun. He was tall, built like an athlete, but his stance was rigid, unwelcoming. The others behind him mirrored his movements, not bothering to hide the uncertainty in their eyes. They didn't know her. They didn't know her story. They didn't know who she was, or what she had done. And for a moment, they assumed she was just another person to be dismissed. Tasha straightened her back, her jaw set with quiet defiance. She didn't flinch, didn't step back. She didn't need to. "What's this about?" she asked, her tone neutral. "We're just making sure everything's okay." "You're in an area you don't belong in," another officer said, his voice a little too sharp, as though he were speaking to someone beneath him. Tasha glanced at Max, who was now standing beside her, his stance strong and alert. She felt Rex's presence at her other side, both dogs trained for moments like this. The officers didn't notice the subtle shift in the dog's behavior, but Tasha did. She knew exactly what was happening. "I'm fine," she said, still calm. "Just walking my dogs." But they weren't satisfied. One officer took a step closer, trying to get a better look at her face. "Do you know why we're asking you to?" "Stop," he pressed, as if to imply she had something to hide. She could feel his eyes sizing her up, looking for any excuse, any reason to escalate the situation. This was when she knew the truth. This wasn't about her being in the wrong place. This was about them needing control, needing to feel superior. Tasha met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. "I know what you're doing," she said softly. Max shifted his weight, and Rex let out a low growl. The officers froze. They hadn't expected that. "You can stop now," she added, her voice steady. She could feel the tension building, but she remained unshaken. They could see it now, the calm confidence radiating from her. It wasn't just her, it was the presence of the dogs, the years of training, the understanding that she was not someone to be intimidated. The officer closest to her took a step back, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. For a moment, no one moved. The stillness between them seemed to stretch on, heavy and thick. And in that silence, something shifted. The power balance was no longer in their favor. Tasha could feel it. She wasn't just standing up for herself. She was standing up for everyone who had ever been underestimated, ignored, or mistreated because of the color of their skin. And now, the tables had turned. Tasha stood still as the officers hesitated. Max and Rex remained by her side, their eyes sharp, their muscles tense. The silence was thick, but it was not uncomfortable. It was powerful. Tasha knew how to use that silence, how to let the tension hang in the air without giving an inch. She had been in countless situations like this before, but this one felt different. It was more than just a moment of confrontation. It was a test of control. The officers had expected her to cower, to apologize, or worse, to act out. But she wasn't that person. She never had been. The tallest officer, the one who had been the most vocal, took a step back, his eyes flickering between her and the dogs. He had seen the change in their posture, the way they had become more alert, more protective. He knew better than to push further. "What are you doing here?" he asked again, his voice a little softer now, more cautious. Tasha didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced at the dogs, then back at the officers. "Just walking my dogs," she repeated, but her tone was different now. It wasn't a simple statement anymore. It was a declaration. She wasn't afraid of them, and she wasn't going to let them dictate the terms of this encounter. The officer who had been standing closest to her seemed to relax slightly, his stance shifting from confrontational to more neutral. It was a small change, but it spoke volumes. The others still watched, unsure of how to react. They had expected the encounter to escalate, but it wasn't going the way they had imagined. Tasha could see the uncertainty in their eyes, the shift in their energy. She knew that they had never expected her to stand her ground so firmly, so unwaveringly. This was the moment when things started to change. Tasha didn't need to say much more. The message had been sent. She wasn't the kind of person who needed to prove herself with words or actions. She was already proving it by simply existing in this moment. And in that moment, she could feel the power shift. Max and Rex, though still calm, stood ready. They were her presence, her protection. They had been trained to respond to threats, to defend when necessary, but they also knew when to remain still, when to stay grounded. And right now, they were as still as statues. It wasn't a show of aggression. It was a show of confidence, of control. Tasha didn't need to say a word to make that clear. She could feel the officers' gazes soften as they realized who they were dealing with. The tension began to dissipate, slowly but surely. She could see the understanding in their eyes now. They weren't dealing with just any woman walking her dogs. They were dealing with someone who had earned her strength through years of training, of discipline, and of living in a world that constantly tried to put her in a box. She wasn't afraid to break out of that box. The officer who had been most vocal cleared his throat, a gesture that signaled the shift in the atmosphere. "All right," he said, his voice now softer, more respectful. "You're free to go." Tasha nodded once, slowly, and turned to walk away. She didn't look back. The officers remained where they were, watching her. Go. The moment had passed, and they knew better than to press it any further. As she walked away, Max and Rex trotted happily by her side, their tails wagging. The tension had been broken, and in its place, there was only calm. Tasha knew that this wasn't just a victory for her. It was a small victory for anyone who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, or disrespected because of the way they looked. It was a reminder that sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply stand your ground. Tasha continued walking, her pace steady, but the weight of the moment lingered in the air behind her. Max and Rex trotted by her side, their presence grounding her, reminding her of the quiet strength she had within her. The park was peaceful again, the sky now darker, with only the faintest traces of sunlight still peeking through the clouds. As the sound of her footsteps echoed in the empty path, she couldn't help but think about the officers. They had assumed she was just another person they could intimidate, another target to assert their authority over. But she wasn't that person. She never had been. She had learned long ago that in this world, the color of your skin, your gender, or your background meant you had to work twice as hard to prove your worth. Tasha had spent years proving herself, not just to others, but to herself. It was the reason she had chosen a path of discipline, of training dogs, of military service. It was the reason she stood tall in moments like these. She had always known that people would try to put her in a box, to label her based on her appearance or her history, but she had made a decision long ago to break out of that box, to be the one who stood out, who refused to shrink into the shadows. As she neared the edge of the park, she could see a figure in the distance, standing at the entrance. The figure was tall, broad-shouldered, with a dark jacket and cap pulled low over their face. It was an unusual sight at this hour, and something about the way the figure stood caught her attention. Tasha's instincts kicked in. Max and Rex also seemed to notice, their ears twitching, their movements more alert. The figure was still a good distance away, but Tasha could feel the tension building, the hairs on the back of her neck standing up. She wasn't sure why, but something about this person didn't sit right with her. She slowed her pace, instinctively pulling the leash tighter in her hand, signaling to Max and Rex to stay close. As the figure approached, they finally looked up, and Tasha saw their face. It was a man, probably in his late 30s, with sharp features and a stern expression. He didn't smile or wave, just watched her, as if waiting for something. Tasha took a deep breath, her gaze unwavering, ready to face whatever was coming next. She had learned a long time ago that fear could cloud judgment, and she wasn't about to let it cloud hers now. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice firm, but not hostile. The man didn't answer right away, his eyes scanning her, then moving to the dogs, who stood by her side, watching him intently. "You're the one who was with the police earlier, aren't you?" he asked, his tone flat. Tasha nodded, not surprised by the question. "Yes, I am. They said you were making a scene. he remarked, his voice low, almost condescending. I don't make scenes, Tasha replied, her eyes narrowing slightly. I just stand my ground when I need to. The man seemed to consider her response for a moment before his expression softened, just slightly. I've been watching you for a while, he said, his voice quieter now. Watching me? Tasha repeated, her tone skeptical. Why? He paused, looking at her with an intensity that made her feel like he could see through her, see every decision, every choice she had made to get to this point. Because I respect people who can stand tall in moments like those. People who don't let others push them around. Tasha didn't respond right away. She simply regarded him, her gaze steady, her body still. There was something about the way he spoke, the way he looked at her, that seemed almost familiar. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice still calm, but now tinged with suspicion. Nothing, he said, his lips curling into a small smile. I just wanted to see if you were as strong as they say. And now I know. Tasha stood there for a moment, her mind processing his words. The encounter had been brief, but it left her with more questions than answers. The man turned and started walking away without another word, leaving her standing there with Max and Rex by her side. As she watched him disappear into the night, Tasha couldn't help but feel a strange sense of clarity. She had made her mark today, not just on the officers, but on herself. And no matter what came next, she knew she would continue to stand tall. Tasha arrived home, her feet heavy from the weight of the day's events. The park, the officers, the man she had met. Everything seemed to be swirling in her mind, and yet, there was a quiet calm that she couldn't quite shake. Max and Rex, as always, were by her side, trotting ahead of her, their tails swaying with the natural ease they always carried. The world around her felt different now, quieter, almost as if it were waiting for her to make the next move. As she stepped inside her small but cozy apartment, the familiar scent of cedarwood filled the air, and she let out a long, deep breath. It had been a long day, but she had earned it. She had earned every second of peace that came with walking through that door. She moved to the kitchen, taking a moment to pour herself a glass of water. The simple act of drinking felt like a reset, as though it were washing away the tension that had built up. As she sipped the cool liquid, she felt her muscles slowly start to relax. She had been in situations like the one earlier today before. People assumed things about her all the time. They assumed she was weak because of her appearance, because of the way she carried herself. But she knew better. She had learned the hard way that people would always try to fit you into a box, label you, control you. But she also knew that she didn't have to play by their rules. She had the strength to walk away from any situation, to take control when the time came. Her phone buzzed suddenly, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from an unknown number. Tasha hesitated for a moment, then opened it. I saw you today, the message read. You're stronger than you know. You don't have to keep proving it to everyone. She stared at the screen for a moment, the words lingering in the air around her. She didn't recognize the number, but somehow, she didn't feel the need to question it. It was clear who it was from, the man at the park. He had been watching, studying her, and had seen something that others hadn't. Maybe it was that quiet strength, that unwavering confidence that only came when you had been through the fire and come out the other side stronger. She put the phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights below. There was a sense of calm now, a stillness that had settled over her. She had always been the kind of person to push forward, to keep moving. But now, she was learning the value of pausing, of taking a step back and letting the world move around her. She wasn't always in a rush to prove herself anymore. The world would see her strength when it was ready. And that was enough for her. Max padded over to her side, his eyes full of understanding. He sat down beside her, as if knowing that she needed a moment of peace. Rex followed closely behind, resting his head on her lap. Tasha smiled softly and ran her hand through Rex's fur. She knew that she wasn't alone. Not anymore. She had found a strength within herself that no one could take away. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could finally breathe, truly breathe, without the weight of the world pressing down on her. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges, but she was ready. She had nothing left to prove to anyone except herself. Tasha woke up to the sound of the birds outside her window, a soft melody that eased her into consciousness. The sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting gentle stripes across the room. She sat up slowly, stretching her arms above her head as she let out a yawn. The day ahead was just beginning, but already there was a sense of purpose in the air. She had learned to appreciate the small moments, like the quiet morning and the calmness that came before the world started moving in full force. Max and Rex were already awake, their heads poking from the foot of the bed, eyes watching her expectantly. Tasha smiled as she swung her legs over the side of the bed, her feet touching the cool floor. She had become accustomed to their silent companionship, the way they seemed to understand her moods without her saying a word. After a few minutes, she got up and went into the kitchen, the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air as she moved about. The aroma was comforting, familiar, like a ritual that began each day with a sense of warmth. She poured herself a cup, letting the steam rise and swirl before taking her first sip. It was the little things that grounded her. She knew that today would be just another day, but in some ways, it felt different. Maybe it was the interaction with the officers the day before, or maybe it was the message from the man at the park. She didn't know, but something inside her had shifted. She felt a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. It wasn't about proving herself to anyone anymore. It was about embracing who she was and standing firm in that identity. Tasha knew she had faced challenges in the past, and there would be more to come. But now, there was a part of her that felt like she could take on anything that came her way, not because she was stronger than before, but because she had learned to trust herself. She finished her coffee, the warmth settling in her chest, and began getting ready for the day. She pulled on her sneakers, a simple act that felt grounding. It wasn't about rushing through the motions, but about moving with purpose. She wasn't just walking through life anymore. She was living it. The streets outside were busy as always. People were rushing, going about their daily routines. But as Tasha stepped out onto the sidewalk, she felt a sense of calm amidst the chaos. There was noise around her, cars honking, people talking, but it didn't matter. She walked with confidence, her head held high, Max and Rex at her side. The world seemed to move a little slower when she moved through it with purpose. She wasn't trying to be anyone else anymore. She wasn't trying to fit into a mold that others had created for her. She was simply herself, and that was enough. As she made her way down the street, she saw familiar faces, people she had passed by countless times. Some waved, others smiled. But no one knew the full story of who she was, what she had been through, or how far she had come. And that was fine with her. She didn't need them to know. The important thing was that she knew. She knew who she was, and for the first time in a long time, that was enough. As she walked, she noticed a familiar figure standing on the corner up ahead. It was the man from the park, the one who had watched her with those eyes that seemed to see straight through her. He was leaning against a streetlight, his posture relaxed, but there was something about the way he stood that made her pause. He hadn't contacted her since the message the day before, but there he was, waiting. She approached him slowly, her heart steady, her mind clear. "You wanted to talk?" she asked when she was close enough. He smiled slightly, an easy smile that didn't hold any secrets. "I wanted to make sure you were all right," he said, his voice calm and measured. Tasha studied him for a moment, wondering what his angle was. She had a sense about people, a way of reading them that had kept her safe all these years. But with him, there was something different. He wasn't a threat, not in the way she had expected. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice firm. "I don't need anyone checking up on me." He nodded, acknowledging her words, but there was something in his eyes that told her he wasn't done yet. "I know," he said quietly, "but I think you might be more than just fine." Tasha didn't say anything at first. She just looked at him, trying to read between the lines. He wasn't pushing, but he wasn't backing down either. Finally, she spoke. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," he said, his voice steady. "I just want to make sure you're living the way you deserve to." Tasha narrowed her eyes, not entirely trusting him, but there was something about his words that struck a chord. "I'm living just fine," she said, turning to leave. "And that's all that matters." As she walked away, she couldn't help but feel that he had seen something in her, something she hadn't fully realized. Herself. She didn't know what it was, but she felt like she had just taken another step forward. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was alone in this journey. Tasha walked through the bustling city streets, the hum of the morning rush surrounding her, but her mind was elsewhere. She felt a quiet sense of anticipation, the kind that comes when you know something is on the horizon but can't quite figure out what it is. Max and Rex, as usual, trotted beside her, their presence a grounding force that kept her calm amidst the noise. The world around her seemed to move at a different pace, as if she were in her own space, a few steps ahead or maybe a few steps behind. It didn't matter. She was learning to move at her own speed, no longer rushing to meet the expectations of others. The encounter with the man at the park had lingered in her mind longer than she expected. His words, simple yet meaningful, had struck a chord in her. He hadn't been pushing, hadn't demanded anything from her, but there had been something in the way he had spoken, something that made her wonder if he saw something in her that even she hadn't fully realized. She hadn't gone looking for validation, but maybe, just maybe, she was starting to see herself in a new light. As she turned the corner, she saw a familiar face ahead. It was Marcus, a fellow trainer she had worked with in the past. He waved when he saw her, a broad grin on his face. Marcus was one of the few people who had always treated her as an equal, who respected her not because of what she could do, but because of who she was. They had worked together on several projects over the years, but it had been a while since they last spoke. "Tasha," he called out, his voice warm and friendly. "How have you been?" She smiled and walked up to him. "I've been good, just keeping busy." He nodded, his eyes scanning her face, as if searching for something more. "You look different," he said after a moment. "Stronger, more at peace?" She was surprised by his words, but then again, maybe it wasn't all that surprising. She had felt a shift within herself recently, a subtle change that had been hard to define. But now, with Marcus's words, she realized that perhaps it wasn't just her imagination. "Yeah," she replied, her voice steady. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of growing." Marcus's smile widened. "That's good. I've always said you were capable of more than people gave you credit for." Tasha wasn't sure what to say to that. She had heard those words before, but this time, they felt different. They didn't sting, didn't feel like a reminder of something she had to prove. They felt like a simple truth. They were words of encouragement, not of expectation. "You're a force," Marcus continued, his voice quieter now, more serious. "I think the world's going to see that soon. And when it does, it won't be able to look away." Tasha felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had never sought out fame, nor had she wanted the attention. But hearing Marcus say, it made her realize that it wasn't about seeking validation from others. It was about knowing her worth, even if no one else did. "Thanks, Marcus," she said, her voice softer now, more sincere. "That means more than you know." He nodded, looking at her with a mix of admiration and understanding. "Just keep doing what you're doing," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "You're on the right path." Tasha watched as he walked away, the feeling of his words lingering in the air. She stood there for a moment, taking it all in. There was something about today, about this moment, that felt different. It wasn't the first time someone had seen potential in her, but it was the first time she had truly believed in it. She wasn't just walking through life anymore. She was carving her own path, at her own pace, and with a quiet confidence that no one could take from her. As she continued her walk, she couldn't help but smile. The world may not have fully realized her strength yet, but it was only a matter of time. And when that time came, she would be ready. She had nothing left to prove to anyone except herself. And that was all she needed. Tasha woke up to the sound of the rain tapping softly against her window. The air smelled fresh, cool, and crisp, and as she pulled the blanket off, she could feel the calm energy that seemed to have settled in her apartment. The world outside was quiet, just the soft sounds of the city moving as usual, but for her, everything felt different. There was a certain stillness that she hadn't experienced before. She had learned how to let go, how to trust herself, and how to stand firm in the face of challenges. She didn't need validation from anyone anymore. The strength that others had seen in her was now something she felt deeply within. As she made her way to the kitchen to start her morning routine, Max and Rex followed her, both of them sitting by her feet as she poured herself a cup of coffee. They had been there for her every step of the way, their loyalty and companionship a steady force in her life. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt so connected to herself, to her purpose. She had spent years fighting for her place in the world, pushing against the tide, but now, for the first time, she felt at peace with who she was and where she was headed. It wasn't that she had all the answers, but she knew that she didn't need to rush anymore. Everything she had worked for, everything she had learned, had led her here, to this moment. After a few minutes, She finished her coffee and decided to take Max and Rex for a walk. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening as the early morning sun began to rise. The air felt even fresher now, and as they walked through the park, Tasha felt a quiet pride in the way she had come so far. She wasn't the same woman who had faced those officers, who had felt like she had to prove herself to them. She wasn't the same woman who had questioned her own worth. She had realized that her value didn't come from the approval of others, but from within herself. As they walked, Tasha's phone buzzed in her pocket. She took it out, glancing at the message from an unknown number. It was from the man at the park, the one who had spoken to her the other day. "I hope you're doing well. I've been thinking about our conversation. Keep standing tall. The world doesn't know what's coming." The words lingered in her mind for a moment. She didn't know why, but they made her smile. It wasn't that she needed his approval, but there was something about his message that made her feel seen. It wasn't just about him seeing her strength, it was about her recognizing it in herself. She looked up from her phone to find that Max and Rex had stopped at the edge of the park, their eyes focused on something ahead. Tasha followed their gaze and saw a familiar figure walking towards her. It was Marcus, the trainer she had worked with, and this time, he wasn't alone. He was accompanied by a woman, someone Tasha didn't recognize. She raised an eyebrow, wondering what brought them here. As they approached, Marcus smiled warmly. "Tasha, I'm glad to see you," he said, his tone friendly. "I wanted you to meet someone." The woman beside him stepped forward, offering her hand. "I'm Carla," she introduced herself. "Marcus has told me a lot about you." Tasha shook her hand, a bit taken aback by the sudden introduction. "It's nice to meet you," she said, trying to hide her curiosity. Marcus chuckled. "Carla is a fellow trainer. She's been working on some projects, and I thought it might be something you'd be interested in." Tasha raised an eyebrow. "What kind of projects?" she asked, her interest piqued. "We're looking to start a new training program for military dogs," Carla explained. "We need someone with your experience to help us." Your work with Max and Rex speaks for itself. Tasha felt a wave of surprise wash over her. She hadn't expected this. She had been focused on her own training and work, but the idea of helping others, of passing on her knowledge, stirred something inside her. "I don't know," she said, hesitating. "It's a big commitment." Carla smiled. "We're not asking for a lot. Just your expertise, your insight. We think you could make a real impact." Tasha thought for a moment. She wasn't sure if she was ready to take on something new, but something about the opportunity felt right. She had always believed in helping others, in sharing what she had learned, and this could be the perfect chance to do just that. "I'll think about it," she said, finally. Marcus gave her an encouraging nod. "No pressure," he said, "but I think it would be a great fit for you." As they parted ways, Tasha's mind was buzzing with thoughts of the opportunity. It wasn't just about the dogs or the training. It was about her own journey, the way she had grown, and how she could now help others find their strength, just as she had. As she walked back home, Max and Rex trotting beside her, Tasha felt a quiet sense of excitement building within her. There was so much ahead of her, so much she could still do. And for the first time in a long time, she felt ready. Ready to take the next step. Ready to stand tall, not just for herself, but for others too. Tasha sat at her small kitchen table, a steaming cup of tea in front of her. The warm, earthy aroma filled the room, grounding her as she reflected on the events of the past few days. The offer from Marcus and Carla had been unexpected, but there was something inside her that felt ready to embrace this new challenge. It wasn't just about the work itself, but about what it represented. The opportunity to step into a space where she could continue growing, continue sharing what she had learned, and continue helping others find their strength. It was more than she had ever imagined for herself, and yet, it felt like the natural next step. Her mind wandered back to the message from the man at the park. She still didn't know his full story, but his words had stayed with her. "Keep standing tall. The world doesn't know what's coming." His quiet confidence had struck a chord in her. He had seen something in her, just like Marcus had, and in a way, it was as though she were starting to see it in herself too. Maybe that was the most important part of it all, recognizing her own strength, not because others said it was there, but because she felt it deep within herself. The dogs trotted into the room, sensing her shift in energy, their presence as comforting as always. Max sat beside her, his head resting against her leg, while Rex curled up at her feet. They had been with her through everything, and she knew she was ready to take on whatever came next. But even as she felt this quiet sense of readiness, there was a part of her that hesitated. The past had shaped her in ways that weren't easy to forget. It had taught her to be strong, to fight for what she wanted, but it had also made her guarded, cautious, and sometimes afraid of change. But she wasn't that person anymore. She had worked too hard to get here, to the point where she knew she didn't need to be afraid of what lay ahead. She just needed to trust herself, trust that the path she was on was the right one. She took another sip of her tea, the warmth spreading through her as she thought about the future. There would be challenges, of course. There always were, but she was ready for them. She had faced far worse and had come out stronger each time. Now, it was time to help others do the same. She wasn't just going to stand by and let the world pass her by anymore. She was going to take an active role in shaping it, in shaping her own life, and in helping others find their strength along the way. She stood up, her heart steady and her mind clear. It was time to move forward. There was no looking back. Max and Rex stood with her, as always, their eyes full of loyalty and understanding. Together, they made their way to the door, ready to face whatever the world had in store. As she stepped outside, the cool air hit her face, but it didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt like a new beginning, a fresh start. And for the first time in a long time, Tasha felt ready to take that first step. She wasn't just walking down the street anymore. She was walking towards something greater. She had the power within her, and now she was going to use it. She didn't need anyone's approval. She didn't need anyone to tell her what she was capable of. She knew what she could do, and that was enough. Tasha stood at the edge of the sidewalk, watching the city unfold in front of her. The sun had finally broken through the clouds, casting a golden light over everything. It felt like the universe was smiling down on her, encouraging her to keep moving forward, to keep pushing past the limits she had once placed on herself. As she walked, her steps light but purposeful, she couldn't help but think about how far she had come. From the days when she had felt small, invisible, and unsure, to now, where she stood, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally strong, fully aware of her worth. The city was alive with its usual energy, people bustling about their business, cars honking, and the faint hum of conversations around her. But Tasha felt like she was walking in a different rhythm, a rhythm she had chosen for herself. Her mind was clear, and with every step, she felt more connected to her purpose. Max and Rex, as usual, were by her side, walking in tandem with her, their eyes scanning the surroundings, ever watchful, ever loyal. It was a reminder of the journey they had all been on together, how they had supported one another through everything. She had been the one to train them, but they had also trained her. They had taught her the value of patience, of being present in the moment, and of trusting those who walked beside you. The opportunity with Marcus and Carla had been a turning point. It wasn't just about the work, it was about what it represented, an acknowledgement of her growth, her strength, and her ability to make a difference. She hadn't accepted the offer yet, but she could feel it in her bones that it was a step in the right direction. The idea of helping others, of using her experiences to empower those who needed it, felt right. It wasn't about seeking recognition or approval. It was about knowing that what she had to offer could make a real impact. Tasha turned the corner and found herself at the entrance of the park, the place she had walked through countless times, but today, it felt different. She didn't know why, but there was something about it that made her stop and take a deep breath. The air was still, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, and for a moment, she felt like she was the only person in the world. The park had always been a place of refuge for her, a place where she could gather her thoughts and clear her mind. But now, it felt like it was calling her to something greater. She didn't need to figure it out right now. She was just going to walk, take it all in, and trust that whatever came next would be exactly what she needed. As she walked deeper into the park, she noticed a group of people gathered near the fountain. They seemed familiar, but it wasn't until she got closer that she realized they were the same officers from the other day. Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't feel the familiar knot of tension rise in her chest. She had faced them before, and she had stood her ground. She had nothing to prove now. They saw her approaching, and one of the officers, the tallest one, nodded in her direction. There was no tension in the air, no power struggle, just a simple acknowledgement. Tasha stopped a few feet away from them, her posture relaxed but confident. "Good to see you again," the officer said, his voice neutral, but not unkind. Tasha nodded. Likewise, she replied, her tone calm. There was a pause, a brief silence, before he spoke again. We wanted to apologize for the way things went down the other day. It wasn't our place to judge. Tasha looked at him, surprised but not shocked. She had expected them to go on with their day, never acknowledging what had happened. But here they were, standing before her, owning up to their actions. Apology accepted, she said, her voice steady. But it's not about that. It's about understanding that no one should be judged based on how they look, where they come from, or the assumptions others make about them. The officer nodded, his gaze thoughtful. You're right, and we'll remember that going forward. Tasha offered him a small, sincere smile. That's all anyone can ask for, she said before turning and walking away. As she continued down the path, Max and Rex at her side, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. She wasn't walking through life with a chip on her shoulder anymore. She wasn't fighting every battle. She had learned that sometimes the best way to win is to simply stand firm in who you are and move forward. She had taken back control of her story, and no one could take that from her. The world may not always understand, but Tasha knew her worth, and that was enough.